welcome to your sleep story. I'm so glad you're here tonight. Whatever this day was, however long it felt, however much it carried, it is behind you now, completely behind you. You made it through, and that is everything. So let's begin. Before I take you anywhere tonight, I want to count you down from 10 to 1. And as I count, I want you to allow yourself to sink just a little deeper into wherever you are right now. Feel the weight of your body. Feel what is beneath you, holding you. And with each number, just let go a little more. 10. Allow your eyes to close, gently, completely. There is nothing you need to see right now. 9. Feel your shoulders and let them drop as far as they want to go. 8. A slow breath in through the nose. 7. And all the way out. 6. Your hands. Feel them opening. Whatever you've been holding today, you can put it down now. 5. Your jaw is soft. Your face is soft. 4. Your legs are heavy, warm. 3. You're drifting, not asleep yet, but moving that way. 2. The day is behind you, completely and entirely behind you. 1. And now, tonight's sleep story, the relaxation. Before we go anywhere, I want to stay here with you for a moment. Just here, just now, because this moment, this exact moment right now, where you are lying in the quiet, deserves a little attention, a little kindness. Take a breath in for me, from the very bottom of the belly. Good. And let it go. And as you breathe out, I want you to imagine that everything you were carrying today, every worry, every unfinished thought, every heavy thing is just leaving with that breath, just drifting away. You don't have to solve anything tonight. You don't have to figure anything out. You don't have to be anything other than exactly what you are right now. A person who deserves rest. A person who deserves sleep. Because you do. You really do. Whatever happened today, however hard it felt, however much it carried, you made it through. You are here. And that is enough. That is more than enough. You are safe. And you are here. Bring your awareness gently to your feet now. Just notice them and allow them to soften. The toes uncurling, the arches releasing. All the small held tension of the day simply letting go. Let that softness travel upward, through the calves, through the knees, the thighs. All of it warm. All of it heavy, all of it resting now. Your lower back, your hips. Allow yourself to feel the surface beneath you taking your weight completely, fully. You don't have to hold yourself up anymore. The bed has you. The quiet has you. The belly soft. The chest soft. The heart beating steadily as it always has. As it always will. Your shoulders dropping, your arms heavy and warm, your hands open and still, the neck long and loose, and your face, let the jaw go. Let the forehead smooth. Let the eyes be completely still behind their lids. There you are, from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, completely soft, completely warm, completely at rest. You've done beautifully. Now, let me take you somewhere far to the north, where the sea is the color of hammered iron, and the cliffs rise straight out of it, as though the land had simply decided, at some point long ago, to stop apologizing for its own height. And at the very edge of that land, where the grass gives out and the rock takes over, a single white tower stands against the wind, its lamp not yet lit, waiting for the woman who has kept it burning for 34 years to climb the stairs one more time. Come with me. The crossing, imagine the sea road north, out past the last of the ordinary coastline, into the scattered, wind-worn islands that rise from the North Atlantic like the vertebrae of something enormous and ancient, half submerged, still breathing very slowly beneath the water. The Faroe Islands, 18 of them, green-topped and gray-sided, set down in the cold water roughly equidistant between Iceland and Norway and Scotland, close to nothing, surrounded by everything, a place where the weather arrives from 4 directions at once, and the light changes so many times in a single afternoon that people who live there have simply stopped remarking on it. The way people everywhere eventually stop remarking on the ordinary miracles of the place they call home. You are on a boat, if you like to imagine it that way, or you are simply present, carried along by nothing but the intention of the story itself, moving out past the last harbor, past the last cluster of turf-roofed houses painted black and red and mustard yellow against the green hillside, past the last waving figure on the last visible dock, out into open water where the swells grow longer, and the color of the sea deepens from green-gray to something closer to slate, closer to iron. The wind finds you here in a way it did not find you on land, sheltered as the harbors are by the shape of the hills behind them. Out here, the wind is simply present, a constant, moving fact of the world, neither hostile nor gentle, simply itself. The way weather in this part of the world has always simply been itself, indifferent to human preference, magnificent in its indifference. Ahead, rising from the water where an island narrows to its farthest point and gives up its land entirely to the sea, a headland comes into view, a great dark wall of basalt, layered in horizontal bands, the way a book is layered in pages. Each band a separate lava flow from some volcanic age, so distant that the number of years involved stops meaning very much to the ordinary human mind. 6 million years, or 8. The rock patient in a way that makes even the tower's history, which is old, feel almost recent by comparison. And at the very top of that headland, where the cliff face gives way, at last, to something almost level, a narrow shelf of grass and stone, buffeted from every side, entirely exposed to every wind the North Atlantic can produce. A lighthouse stands, white-painted, iron-ringed, its lamp room glass catching the last gray light of the day. It has stood there since 1927, alone, at the absolute edge of the habitable world, doing the one simple thing it has always done. The headland itself has a Faroese name, one that translates, roughly and imperfectly, into something like the point where the birds gather. An entirely accurate description, as it happens, of a place where tens of thousands of seabirds have nested on the cliff ledges for as long as anyone has kept any kind of record, and very probably for a great many centuries before anyone thought to keep one. The approach to the lighthouse, on the rare days when a boat can safely land at all, follows a narrow path cut into the hillside 100 years ago by the men who built the light and needed some way to carry their materials up from the tiny natural harbor below. A path that switches back and forth up the steep grass slope, worn into the peaty soil by 4 generations of keepers' boots, marked here and there by a low stone cairn where the fog, which arrives on this headland with very little warning and very little mercy, might otherwise make the path impossible to find. The grass, cropped close by the small flock of hardy sheep that has grazed this headland since long before the lighthouse existed, is a green so saturated it looks almost artificial in the rare hours of direct sun, and almost black in the far more common hours of low cloud and drifting mist. Wildflowers hold on in the more sheltered folds of the ground, thrift mostly, its small pink globes trembling constantly in the wind, along with sea campion and the low mats of moss campion that seem, somehow, to have made a permanent peace with conditions that would kill most growing things within a season. Below, where the cliff drops away entirely, the sea works at the base of the rock the way it has worked at that same base for millions of years, patient beyond any human comprehension of patience, the white water breaking and withdrawing and breaking again in a rhythm that has no beginning that anyone can identify, and as far as anyone can tell, no ending that anyone needs to worry about. The wind carries salt spray even this high, even this far from the water, a fine, cold mist that settles on your face and your hands, that has settled on the faces and hands of every keeper who has ever climbed this path, that will settle on the faces and hands of whoever comes after them too. You climb. The tower grows larger above you with every switchback, white against a sky that is beginning, very gradually, to lose its last daylight color. The tower, the lighthouse itself, is not especially tall, 60 feet or so from its stone foundation to the gallery rail that circles the lamp room. Modest by the standards of the great coastal towers built to warn ships away from long, low, dangerous shores, it did not need to be tall. It needed only to sit exactly where it sits, at the very top of a cliff already several hundred feet above the sea, so that its light, when it turns, is visible from a height that no tower alone could ever achieve. The rock itself doing half the work that the masonry only needed to finish. The tower is built of dressed stone at its base, pale gray, quarried from elsewhere in the islands, and brought here by boat in the same difficult, patient way that everything on this headland has always had to be brought, rising to a cylindrical body of painted iron plate above. riveted in overlapping bands, the way ships of the same era were riveted. Because the engineers who designed these remote lights in the last years before the First World War and the years just after it borrowed freely and sensibly from marine construction, building towers that needed, in the end, to survive very much the same violence of wind and water that a ship at sea needed to survive. The paint is white, reapplied every few years by a maintenance crew that arrives by boat on one of the handful of days each summer when the sea and the weather cooperate long enough to make the work possible. The white chosen not for beauty, though it does possess a certain plain, working beauty, but for visibility. A white tower against a green hillside and a gray sky being, on balance, the most reliably visible shape that paint and geography can produce. At the top, the lamp room, an octagonal glass housing, its panes thick and slightly curved, protecting the lens and its mechanism from the worst of the weather while still allowing the light, when it is lit, to pass outward in its full, unobstructed strength. A narrow iron gallery circles the lamp room's exterior, its railing salt-crusted and cold, accessible through a low door for the occasional necessary work of cleaning the outer glass. Work that can only safely be done in the calmest of conditions, which on this particular headland are not especially common. Below the lamp room, the tower's iron body descends in a long, graceful taper to the stone base, and beside that base, sheltered as much as anything on this headland can be sheltered, a small stone keeper's cottage sits with its back to the worst of the prevailing wind, its single chimney sending up a thin, steady thread of peat smoke into the darkening sky. You stand before the tower's door. It looks down at you in its own patient, iron way, as it has looked down on everything that has ever happened on this small, wind-scoured shelf of rock. The door at the tower's base is iron, painted the same white as the tower itself, though the paint here has worn thin at the handle, and the hinges from a century of hands and a century of salt air working steadily against it. It is not locked. There has never, in the tower's whole history, been any particular reason to lock it. Nothing up here to steal. No one up here to steal it. The headland's isolation serving, all on its own, as a more effective deterrent than any lock could ever provide. You push it open. The smell finds you immediately, before your eyes have adjusted to the tower's dim interior. Cold iron, the particular mineral smell of a metal structure that spends its whole existence wet with salt spray and dried by wind and wet again. A smell with a faint tang to it, almost metallic on the tongue, that has nothing in common with the mineral smell of old stone, and yet occupies, in its own way, a very similar place in the senses, the smell of something old, something enduring, something that has simply continued, season after season, doing what it was built to do. Machine oil faintly from the mechanism far above, and peat smoke drifting in from the cottage's chimney, and finding its way somehow into every corner of the tower's lower rooms. A warm, earthy, slightly sweet smell that sits strangely and rather wonderfully against the tower's cold iron and colder stone. You look up the tower's narrow, central stair. A sound from above descends toward you. Slow footsteps, measured, unhurried. The keeper is coming down. Marjun. She is 68 years old. Her name is Marjun. She has kept this light for 34 years. Since she was 34 herself, exactly half her present life spent climbing these same iron stairs, tending this same lamp, watching this same stretch of gray, restless water from this same small window of sky. Before her, the light was kept by her father, Petter, for 40 years before that. A man who had come to the headland as a young widower with a small daughter, taken the post partly out of necessity and partly, he always said, because the sea had already taken so much from him that he wanted, for once, to be the one who kept something safe from it instead. Marjun grew up in the cottage below the tower, climbed these same stairs first as a small child following her father's boots, then as a girl old enough to be trusted with small tasks, polishing brass, trimming the old oil wick before the light was electrified, keeping the logbook's careful daily entries in a hand that started out childish and became, over the years, as steady and legible as her father's own. When Petter's knees finally gave out the climb, in the year Marjun turned 34, there was no formal application, no advertised post, no outside candidate ever seriously considered. The harbor authority simply confirmed, in the unhurried, entirely sensible way, that such things are confirmed on a small island where everyone already knows the relevant facts, what everyone had already assumed for years, that Marjun would keep the light next, because she already knew it better than anyone alive, and because there was, in any case, nowhere else on earth she had ever particularly wanted to be. She comes now, slowly, down the tower's narrow iron stair, emerging into the small entry room at its base, carrying a rag in one hand and a small tin of the particular lens polish she uses each evening on the great glass prisms above. An evening's maintenance work completed before her scheduled dusk lighting. The same careful, unglamorous upkeep she has given this lamp across 34 years. She sees you and nods, a small, entirely unsurprised nod. People come to this headland sometimes when the weather allows a boat to land, simply to stand at the edge of the world for a while and look at the tower and the sea beyond it. Marjun has never found this remarkable. She finds it, if anything, entirely understandable. The lens, let me tell you about the lamp itself, because it deserves your full attention before it is lit. At the heart of the lamp room sits a great lens, a full-order Fresnel lens cast and assembled in France in the final years of the 19th century, shipped north in careful, padded crates by steamer, and then by smaller boat, and then, for the final impossible stretch, carried up the cliff path by hand, piece by piece, by a crew of local men who had never in their lives handled anything so strange or so valuable. The lens is a marvel of a particular, patient kind of genius. Hundreds of individual glass prisms, each cut and ground and polished to an exactness that 19th century craftsmen achieved with instruments that would look almost primitive by modern standards, arranged in concentric rings around a central bullseye panel. The whole assembly designed to take the comparatively modest light of a single lamp and bend it, refract it, gather it into a single powerful beam capable of reaching ships 30 miles out on a clear night. The lamp itself, in Marjan's father's time, burned paraffin, its wick requiring careful daily trimming to keep the flame steady and bright. The whole mechanism turning slowly on a bath of liquid mercury, so frictionless that a child, Marjan herself once, could set the entire multi-ton assembly rotating with a single gentle push of one hand. Electrified now, the lamp burns a modern bulb of relatively modest wattage, the lens doing what it has always done, taking that ordinary light and transforming it through nothing but the patient geometry of angled glass into something that can be seen from the deck of a fishing boat working the grounds far out past the horizon. Something that has, across a full century, told an uncountable number of sailors exactly where the rocks are and exactly where the safe water begins. The lens turns on the same mercury bath it always has, driven now by a small electric motor rather than the weighted clockwork mechanism of the tower's first decades. Though that original clockwork mechanism, retired but never removed, still sits in its housing below the lamp room, polished and oiled by Marjan twice, a year out of something that is not quite sentiment and not quite duty, but sits comfortably somewhere between the two. The light's particular character, 3 seconds of light, then a pause of dark, then a fourth, longer flash before the whole sequence repeats, is recorded on nautical charts the world over as this headland's own signature, as individual and unmistakable to a sailor who knows how to read it as a person's own voice. Marjan knows this signature so well, she does not need to look at it to know it is correct. She feels it, somehow, in the rhythm of her own body, the way a person feels the rhythm of a song they have heard 10,000 times. The staircase inside the tower is a tight iron spiral, its steps riveted to a central column, painted the same white as the tower's exterior, though the paint here, protected from weather, but not from decades of climbing boots, has worn through in places to bare, dull metal. It winds upward past 3 small landings, the first giving onto the tiny room where the tower's logbooks are kept, shelves of them, stretching back nearly a century in a succession of different hands, different inks, different qualities of paper, each entry recording nothing more dramatic, on most days, than the weather, the visibility, and the simple confirmation that the light was lit at the correct hour and extinguished at the correct hour the following morning. The second landing giving onto the small mechanism room where the lens's motor and the fog signals equipment are housed, humming quietly to themselves in the tower's cool interior air. The third landing opening directly into the lamp room itself. Margin climbs these stairs several times each day, more often than the simple lighting schedule strictly requires. Since the checking of the mechanism, the polishing of the glass, the small adjustments that an instrument this old and this constantly exposed to salt air inevitably requires, brings her up and down this familiar spiral far more frequently than any simple accounting of her official duties would suggest. She climbs them slowly now, not because her body is incapable of faster movement, though her knees, at 68, do register the considerable number of these particular stairs that 34 years of daily use have required them to manage her father's own knees. She has come to understand, with a certain wry, inherited humor, having apparently passed down to her along with everything else. She climbs them slowly because this is how she has always climbed them. Slowly, deliberately, each step familiar enough that no particular attention is required. The mind free to drift, to settle, to find whatever quietness 34 years of climbing. These same iron stairs have trained it to find here, spiraling upward between the restless sea below and the waiting lamp above. The tower creaks faintly, as it always does in any wind, not a worrying sound, not after so many decades of hearing it, but simply the sound of iron and rivets doing exactly what iron and rivets are meant to do, flexing very slightly rather than breaking, absorbing the wind's constant pressure the way a tree absorbs it, through small, continuous, entirely harmless give. Outside, through the narrow window slits set at each landing, the sky continues its slow transition from gray daylight toward the deeper blue-gray of a northern dusk that, at this latitude and this time of year, takes its own unhurried time to fully arrive. The birds. Before we go further, I want to tell you about the birds, because on this headland they are impossible to separate from the tower, from the cliffs, from the whole particular character of this place. The cliff face below the lighthouse holds one of the largest seabird colonies in this part of the North Atlantic. Tens of thousands of pairs, layered onto ledges so narrow and so numerous that from a distance the whole cliff face seems to shimmer and shift, alive in a way that solid rock has no business appearing alive. Fulmars ride the updraft along the cliff edge on stiff, unmoving wings, tilting first one way and then the other with barely a feather's adjustment. Masters of a particular kind of effortless, endless gliding that took Margin, as a child watching from the lamp room window, a very long time to stop finding miraculous, and that she has, in truth, never entirely stopped finding miraculous, even now. Puffins, smaller and rounder, and considerably less graceful in the air, were passed in fast, straight lines toward their burrows in the grassy slope below the tower, orange feet trailing behind them, their bright bills catching whatever light remains in the sky. Guillemots stand in dense, orderly rows on the narrowest ledges, upright as small dark soldiers, their single eggs pointed at one end for the specific purpose of rolling in a tight circle rather than off the ledge entirely. Should a careless wing beat ever nudge one tucked against the bare rock beneath them, by this hour of the evening, most of the colony has quieted into its own version of the night settling. The endless daytime traffic of birds arriving from the fishing grounds and departing toward them slowing to an occasional late arrival. A few last calls carrying up from the ledges below on the wind. The particular, layered, ceaseless murmur of the colony reducing itself, gradually, to something closer to a low, steady hum. Marjan has lived beside this sound for 68 years. She does not remember a time before it, and cannot easily imagine what silence would feel like on this headland, the bird's constant presence having become, for her, something closer to weather than to noise, simply a condition of the place, felt more than consciously heard, the way a person living beside a river stops hearing the river, and instead simply feels, in some quiet, unconscious register, its constant presence. The cottage, beside the tower's base, sheltered by a low stone wall built specifically to break the worst of the prevailing westerly wind. The keeper's cottage sits close to the ground, its roof turfed in the old island style. A thick, insulating layer of soil and growing grass that keeps the single-room dwelling warmer in the depths of winter than any amount of slate or tile ever could. Marjan's father built the cottage's newer half himself in the years just after the light was electrified, and the post's demands eased slightly from the round-the-clock vigilance the old paraffin lamp had required. A second room, a proper stove, a window facing east to catch whatever morning sun this often clouded headland manages to produce. Inside, this evening, a peat fire burns low and steady in the old stone hearth, its smoke drawing up through a chimney built, like everything else on this headland, to withstand wind that would collapse a lesser structure within a single winter. A kettle sits warming at the fire's edge. Marjan's late husband's chair. He was a fisherman from the next island over, drowned in a squall 11 years ago now, in waters not far from this same headland, a loss the whole small community carries with her still, quietly. The way small communities carry such things sits empty by the window, kept exactly where it has always sat, not out of any morbid preservation, but simply because it has never occurred to Marjan, or to anyone who visits her, that it should be anywhere else. Photographs line one wall, her father, young and unsmiling in the stiff formal style of old portraits, her husband, laughing on the deck of his boat, her two grown children, both settled now on the main island, both coming to visit when the ferry schedule and the weather allow, both having grown up exactly as Marjan herself grew up, running these same paths and climbing these same stairs as small children who thought a lighthouse was simply the most natural home in the world. The cottage smells of peat smoke and salt, and the particular, faint mustiness of old wool sweaters drying by the fire. A smell that has not changed, as far as Margin can tell. In the 68 years she has been breathing it. It is, whatever else it is, entirely and unmistakably home. The evening light. Outside, the sky continues its slow descent through the long northern dusk. The sun somewhere below the horizon now. Its last light spread thin and gray gold across the underside of a bank of cloud that has been building gently out over the open water all afternoon. The sea itself has taken on the particular pewter color it wears at this hour. Not the deep black it will become once full night arrives, not the brighter gray of full day, but something in between, something that seems, if you watch it long enough, to hold within it every shade of gray the world has ever produced. Rain moves across the water in the middle distance, a visible gray curtain, one of perhaps a dozen such passing showers this headland will see before the night is through. Each one arriving without much warning, each one departing just as quickly. The local weather here operating on a scale of minutes and hours that people who live in gentler climates find, when they visit, faintly astonishing. The wind, which has not stopped, and will not stop, not tonight, not most nights, carries the smell of the sea directly into every corner of the headland, salt, and something colder and more mineral beneath the salt. The smell of very deep, very cold water that has traveled a very long way before reaching this particular shore. A single fishing boat works the water some miles out, its running lights small and steady against the darkening sea, making its way home, or perhaps out toward the grounds for a night's work. The small vessel's presence a quiet reminder of exactly why this lighthouse exists at all, for boats just like that one, and for the people aboard them, who will, within the hour, be looking toward this headland for the light that tells them where the safe water is. Margin has climbed back up to the lamp room now. She checks the lens one final time, running her polishing cloth over the outer glass with the same careful, circular motion her father taught her 60 years ago, removing the last traces of salt spray that even the shortest exposure to this wind reliably deposits. She checks the small brass clock mounted beside the mechanism. Nearly time. The lighting. This is the moment Margin has performed, in one form or another, some 12,000 times across 34 years. And her father performed it 14,000 times before her. And it is, despite that vast and almost unimaginable repetition, a moment she has never once found routine. She reaches for the switch. Let me count you toward it with her, slowly. The way the light itself will soon begin its own slow, patient counting across the dark water. 1. Her hand rests on the switch, steady, unhurried, the whole tower quiet around her. 2. Outside, the last gray light is finally, fully gone from the sky. The horizon no longer distinguishable from the sea beneath it. 3. The birds below, have gone almost entirely silent now, settling into their ledges for the night, tucking into the same small hollows of rock their parents and grandparents settled into before them. 4. The wind continues, steady, constant, exactly as it has been for as long as anyone can remember, exactly as it will continue to be long after tonight is over. 5. Margin presses the switch. The lamp catches. 6. Light floods the great lens, gathered instantly by the hundreds of precisely angled prisms into a single, powerful, outward-reaching beam. 7. The mechanism begins its slow rotation on its bath of frictionless mercury, the beam beginning its own patient sweep across the dark water. 8. 3 seconds of light. 9. A pause of dark. 10. And the fourth, longer flash, exactly as it has flashed on this headland for 100 years, exactly as the charts the world over say it will. The light is lit. The sequence repeats and repeats, and will go on repeating, steady and unhurried, until the sun returns tomorrow morning to make it unnecessary once again. The beam itself, if you could rise above the headland and watch it from some impossible vantage point out over the dark water, sweeps across the sea in a great, slow circle, 30 miles of reach on a clear night like this one, touching the black water and the black sky in equal measure, indifferent to which one it happens to be illuminating at any given moment. It touches the fishing boat working the ground some miles out, and the boat's crew, if any of them happen to glance shoreward at exactly the right second, see the familiar rhythm: 3 seconds, dark, 4 seconds, and know, without needing to think about it any more than they need to think about their own names, exactly where they are relative to the rocks and the safe water. It touches the cliff face below, illuminating for an instant the thousands of roosting birds tucked into their ledges, their pale breast feathers catching the light in a brief, silvery flicker before the beam sweeps past and leaves them once again in darkness. It touches the rain still moving across the water in the middle distance, each drop, for one impossibly brief moment, catching a fragment of the light before the beam has already moved on, already sweeping toward the next portion of its endless circle. It touches nothing at all, for most of its circle, sweeping out over open water where no ship happens to be present tonight, over dark sea that stretches, uninterrupted, for hundreds of miles before it reaches any other shore. The light given just as fully, just as completely, to this empty water as it would be given to 100 ships, because that has always been the particular, patient honesty of a lighthouse. It does not wait to see who needs it before it shines. Margin stands beside the great lens for a while, watching the beam sweep past the lamp room's glass, feeling, as she has felt 12,000 times before, and will feel again tomorrow night, the small, steady satisfaction of a simple job done correctly. The light is lit. The headland has done, once again, the one thing it exists to do, the fog that does not come tonight. On some nights, this headland disappears into fog so complete that even the great beam above cannot penetrate it. The light itself reduced to a faint, useless glow inside a wall of gray that swallows everything beyond arm's reach. And on those nights, the tower's second voice takes over, a deep foghorn blast sounding out across the water at measured intervals. A sound so low it is felt in the chest as much as heard, guiding ships by ear when the light can no longer guide them by sight. Tonight is not one of those nights. Tonight the air, though damp and cold, and carrying its usual freight of intermittent rain showers, remains clear enough for the light to do its proper work. The beam sweeping unobstructed across open water, visible, Margin knows, without needing to check. From a very great distance, indeed. She is grateful for this. In the quiet, undemonstrative way, she is grateful for most ordinary mercies. A clear night, meaning an easier watch. A foghorn that can rest silent in its housing. A headland that can be heard, for once, in nothing but wind and sea and the settling birds, rather than in the foghorn's own deep, repeated, necessary interruption. She has stood many hundreds of foggy watches across 34 years, has learned to find, even in the particular tension of a heavy fog night, its own kind of settled rhythm. The horn's blast, the counted interval of silence, the horn's blast again, on and on through the night, a discipline of attention that becomes, eventually, almost as familiar and almost as calming as clear night silence itself. But tonight, she can simply stand at the lamp room window and watch the beams sweep past and listen to nothing more demanding than the wind and the sea and the last murmurs of the settling colony below. It is, on this particular headland, something close to a small luxury. The logbook. Before she descends, Margin crosses to the small shelf where this year's logbook sits and makes her evening entry in the same steady, careful hand her father taught her, the same hand that has filled the pages of 34 consecutive yearly volumes, sitting now on the shelf below alongside the 40 volumes that came before them, an unbroken record stretching back to the tower's earliest years, light lit at the correct hour, wind westerly, moderate to fresh, visibility good, sea moderate, nothing remarkable to report. This has been the substance of the overwhelming majority of every entry ever made in this logbook, across a full century of careful daily record keeping. Not drama, not incident, but the patient, unremarkable, entirely necessary confirmation that the ordinary work has been ordinarily done, that the light has been lit, that the headland continues to perform its one simple duty. Margin has always found something quietly moving in this fact, though she would not put it in quite such words herself, that the true measure of a lighthouse's success is not the dramatic rescue, not the ship saved at the very last moment from the rocks, though such things have happened here too, recorded in their own more detailed entries scattered across the decades, but rather the enormous, invisible accumulation of ordinary, unremarkable nights, just like this one. Nights when the light simply did what it was meant to do. And no ship ever came close enough to the rocks to need anything more dramatic from it at all. She closes the logbook. She takes one last look at the great lens, turning steadily on its mercury bath, the beam sweeping its patient circle out over the dark water. She begins her descent, the building of the light. Let me tell you, while Margin sits by her fire, how this tower came to stand here at all, because the story of its building is itself a kind of long, slow, patient thing, well suited to an hour like this one. Before 1927, ships passing this headland in poor weather had only the coastline itself to guide them. And the coastline here, all cliff and rock and sudden shallow water, guided them badly. The wrecks recorded in the old harbor registers of the surrounding islands, numbering more than anyone particularly likes to count, fishing boats and small trading vessels. And on one especially remembered occasion, a passenger steamer that came within what the survivors always described as a very few minutes of running herself directly onto the rocks below this very headland in a night of thick fog and heavy sea. It was that steamer, in the end, more than any of the smaller, quieter losses that had come before it, that finally persuaded the distant maritime authorities responsible for such decisions that a light was needed here, at this specific, dangerous, remote point. Whatever the difficulty and expense of building one, the difficulty and expense turned out to be considerable. There was no harbor on the headland itself, only the small, exposed cove far below, where a boat could land materials on perhaps one day in 5, weather permitting, and even then only during the brief, calm windows of an incoming or outgoing tide that a local pilot, watching the water with an eye trained across a lifetime, judged safe enough to attempt. Every stone of the tower's base, every iron plate of its rising body, every pane of curved glass for the lamp room, every crated section of the great French lens had to be landed in exactly this narrow, unreliable window, then carried by hand, or by a simple wooden sledge dragged behind a pony, up the same steep switchback path that Margin herself still climbs today. A full mile of difficult, exposed ground between the cove and the building site. The work took the better part of 3 years, carried out by a rotating crew of local men, fishermen and crofters mostly, glad of the wages in years when the fishing had been poor, working in whatever brief stretches of tolerable, whether the headland allowed them, retreating to a temporary turf-roofed bothy whenever the wind or the rain made further work impossible, which it did, by the surviving accounts, rather more often than it allowed the work to continue. One man died in the building of it, a fall from the half-finished towers, scaffolding in a sudden gust, in the 2nd year of construction, his name recorded, along with a brief, formal note of condolence, in the very first pages of the tower's very first logbook. A quiet, permanent reminder, still there for anyone who cares to look, of exactly what this small, patient structure cost to build. The light was finally lit for the first time on a clear October evening in 1927. Its keeper at the time, a young man named Absalon, who had been present as a boy of 19 for nearly every stage of the tower's slow construction, and who wrote in that first logbook entry, in a hand still slightly unsteady, with what one imagines must have been a very particular kind of pride. Light lit at the correct hour, and nothing more. Absalon kept the light for 11 years before an illness took him early. Marjan's father, Petter, succeeded him and kept it 40 years. Marjan succeeded her father and has kept it 34 years now, and counting. The other keepers, there have been, across the tower's full 100-year history, only 4 keepers in total, a fact that says something Marjan has always felt about the particular character of this work and the particular character of the people drawn to it. It is not a post that suits everyone. The isolation alone rules out most people almost immediately, weeks at a stretch, in the worst winter weather, when the sea makes any crossing to, or from the mainland, impossible. And the keeper, and whatever family shares the cottage, are simply entirely alone on this small shelf of rock at the edge of the world, dependent on stores laid in during the calmer months, dependent on the radio for whatever news of the wider world seems worth hearing, dependent, above all, on their own capacity to find enough within the headland's small, repeating rhythms to sustain a life. Marjan has never found this difficult, though she recognizes, from the visitors who occasionally make the crossing on a calm summer day, that most people would. She has the whole sea for company, and the birds, and the wind, and the light's own steady, familiar turning. And she has found, across 68 years of living within exactly this combination of things, that it has always, in the end, been enough. Her children did not stay, both of them left. As young people from headlands like this one nearly always eventually leave, for the wider opportunities of the main island and beyond. And Marjan has never once resented this, understanding, as her own father understood before her, that a life on this headland is a life chosen, not a life that ought to be imposed on anyone who has not chosen it freely and fully themselves. But they visit. Her daughter Bjorg comes most summers with her own small children, who run the same paths Marjan ran at their age, who climb the same tower stairs under Marjan's own careful, watchful supervision, who stand at the lamp room window and watch the great lens turn with the same wide, unguarded wonder that Marjan herself once felt and still feels, standing at that same window. Her son Hans calls by radio most weeks, his voice arriving from the main island's small exchange, brief and practical, and beneath the practicality, warm in the particular understated way that people from this kind of place tend to be warm. It is, Marjan has come to understand, a small life by most ordinary measures, and an enormous one by others, small in its geography, small in its daily variation, and yet vast, somehow, in the sheer accumulated weight of everything it has quietly held across 3 generations of careful, patient watching. A storm she, RMBRS. There was a night, some 19 years ago now, that Margin still thinks of sometimes. On evenings like this one, when the wind, though present, is nothing more than its ordinary constant self. It was late in the autumn, and the forecast, unreliable as forecasts on this headland have always tended to be, had given no particular warning of what arrived that night. A deep, low-pressure system sweeping up from the south with a speed and a violence that even Margin, who had by then already spent 15 years learning this headland's every mood, had rarely seen matched. The wind that night did not simply blow. It arrived in enormous physical pulses, each one striking the tower with a force that Margin could feel through the iron stair beneath her feet. The whole structure groaning under a strain far beyond its ordinary flexing. Groaning in a register she had never quite heard from it before, and has been grateful, in the years since, never to have heard from it again. She climbed to the lamp room that night against every instinct that told her to stay below, because the light, in weather exactly like this, mattered more than it had ever mattered on any calm, clear evening. A fishing boat known to be working somewhere out past the headland, its crew known personally to Margin and to everyone in the small community of islands around her, had gone quiet on the radio some hours before, and the light, whatever else happened, needed to keep turning, needed to keep offering whatever guidance it could to a boat that might, at any moment, come looking desperately for exactly this signature of 3 seconds, and a pause, and a longer flash. She stayed in the lamp room through the worst hours of that storm, watching the great lens continue its patient turning, even as rain drove sideways against the glass, with a sound like gravel thrown by the handful, even as the whole tower swayed, very slightly, in gusts that the following day's assessment recorded from the anemometer on the main island. At speeds she still finds faintly unbelievable when she recalls the number. The boat made it home, in the end, hours after Margin had given up any real hope of it. Its crew half frozen and thoroughly frightened, but entirely alive, guided the final difficult miles. They said afterward, gathered around Margin's own hearth, with cups of tea in hands that had not yet stopped shaking, by nothing more than the light's own patient, unbroken signature appearing and vanishing, and appearing again through the worst of the driving rain. Margin does not tell this story often, but she thinks of it quietly on nights like tonight, when the wind is nothing more than its ordinary self, and the light turns above her with nothing more demanding to do than sweep its beam across calm, empty water. She is grateful, in a way she has never quite found the right words for, that most nights are simply this, ordinary, uneventful, quietly sufficient. Winter on the headland. The winters here arrive early and leave late. The headland's exposed position, giving it a weather all its own, distinct even from the rest of these already weather-beaten islands. By the time the rest of the world has reached late autumn, this cliff top has already felt its first true winter gales. The grass flattened for days at a stretch under wind that makes even the short walk between the tower and the cottage a genuine, deliberate undertaking. One requiring a rope strung between the two buildings in the very worst weeks. A simple precaution Petter first rigged decades ago, and that Margin has maintained and renewed every autumn since. The days shorten dramatically at this latitude. The sun, on the shortest days, barely climbing above the southern horizon before it begins its early retreat again. The light lit now not only at dusk, but through long stretches of gray, sunless midday as well. The tower doing double duty across the darkest months of the year. Snow rarely settles for long. The constant wind and the sea's moderating warmth keeping the ground mostly bare even in the coldest weeks. Though when it does settle, briefly, it transforms the headland into something Margin has always found quietly, startlingly beautiful. The green turf gone white, the black cliff face streaked with it, the whole familiar landscape rendered, for a day or two, into something that looks almost unfamiliar, almost new, before the wind and the thaw return it to its ordinary self. The birds mostly leave for these months. The great colonies, tens of thousands of pairs, departing to spend the darkest season out on the open ocean itself, following the fish, leaving the cliff ledges empty and silent in a way that Margin still finds, after 68 winters, faintly unsettling. The headland's constant background presence simply gone, replaced by nothing but wind and wave and her own quiet company in the cottage below. They return each spring, arriving over the course of a few remarkable days in a great, sudden influx that fills the empty ledges again almost overnight. The whole cliff face coming back to its full, teeming life in a transformation Margin has watched 68 times now, and has never once found less than remarkable. Tonight is not a winter night. The season is mild still, early autumn, the birds not yet departed, the wind present, but not yet arrived at its full winter violence. It is, in its own particular way, one of the gentler nights this headland offers. The fishing boats, out past the headland, invisible now in the full dark beyond the reach even of the great lamp's beam. The fishing grounds continue their own quiet, essential work. Boats from this island and the neighboring ones working through the night in the patient, practiced way that fishing in these waters has always demanded. Margin knows many of these boats by name, and many of their crews personally. This small, scattered community's lives, interwoven across generations in the close, familiar way that small island communities have always been interwoven. The same handful of surnames appearing again and again across the crew lists and the harbor registers, and the small local newspapers' occasional notices, cousins and second cousins, and old school friends, all of them dependent, in some quiet, unspoken way, on the light Margin tends turning steadily above them through every hour of the dark. She thinks of them sometimes, on nights like this one, sitting by her fire with her tea cooling beside her. Not with any particular worry. The sea tonight calm enough, and the visibility good enough that there is little real cause for it, but simply with the quiet, habitual awareness of a woman who has spent her whole life understanding herself to be part of a larger, essential chain, one link among several, connecting a boat somewhere out in the dark water to a safe harbor somewhere behind it. The light does not know which boats are out there tonight, does not know their names or their crews or the particular hopes and worries carried aboard each one. It simply turns, giving its steady signature to whoever happens to need it, exactly as it has given that same signature to every boat that has ever needed it across a full 100 years of turning. Marjan finds something deeply calming in this fact, has found it calming across 34 years of tending this same patient, indifferent, essential light. It does not need to know. It only needs to shine. The sound of the sea. If you have never lived beside the open ocean, it can be difficult to fully imagine the particular, constant, layered sound it makes against a cliff base like the one below this headland. Not a single sound, but many sounds at once, overlapping and shifting in a pattern that never quite repeats and never quite stops repeating either. There is the deep, low boom of the larger swells striking the cliff's exposed face directly. A sound felt as much as heard, arriving at irregular intervals that somehow, across a lifetime of listening, come to feel entirely regular, entirely expected. The way a heartbeat feels regular despite its own constant, small variations. There is the higher, hissing rush of water drawing back off the rocks after each strike. A sound that seems, if you listen closely enough, to contain within it 1,000 smaller, individual sounds, pebbles rolling, water finding its way through narrow channels in the rock, the last thin trickle of a wave's final retreat before the next one arrives to begin the whole pattern again. There is, further out, the sea's own constant low murmur, the sound of open water simply existing, simply moving, a sound with no particular event to mark it, no single wave or strike to identify, just the vast, continuous fact of an ocean that never entirely stops moving, not for a single moment, not across the whole of its existence. Marjan has fallen asleep to this sound every night of her life, in this cottage, or before that, in the cottage's earlier and smaller incarnation, has never known any other nighttime sound as her own, and has found, on the rare occasions she has slept elsewhere, in some quieter inland place, that the unfamiliar total silence keeps her awake far more effectively than this constant, layered, familiar sound ever has. The sea does not stop for her tonight either. It continues its same patient work at the cliff base, exactly as it has continued through every night of her 68 years, exactly as it will continue long after this particular light. And this particular keeper, and this particular story have all quietly passed into whatever comes after them. You can let this same sound hold you now, if you like. The deep boom of the swell, the hissing draw of the retreat, the vast, continuous murmur beneath it all. The children's room, upstairs in the cottage's small second room, added, like the rest of that half of the house, by Petter's own hands in the years after electrification. 2 narrow beds still stand exactly where they have stood since Marjan's own children were small, made up now with clean linen, in quiet, permanent readiness for the next visit, whenever the fairy schedule and the weather next allow it. A shelf along one wall holds a small collection of toys and books that have somehow never quite left this room across 3 generations. A wooden boat, hand-carved by Petter for Marjan herself when she was 6 years old, its paint long since worn away by decades of small hands. A stack of picture books, their spines soft and their pages slightly warped by the cottage's constant damp sea air. A jar of smooth beach stones and sea glass, collected over the years from the tiny cove below, by Marjan as a girl, and by her own children after her, and most recently by her grandchildren, each new small collector adding a few fresh pieces to a jar that has, by now, been filling itself slowly for the better part of a century. The window in this room faces east, catching whatever morning light this often clouded headland manages to produce. And Marjan remembers, with a clarity that surprises her sometimes, the particular quality of her own children's voices calling down the stairs on clear summer mornings, eager to be out and running the paths before the day's chores began. The room is quiet tonight, as it is quiet on most nights, waiting in its patient, unhurried way for whichever grandchild next comes to fill it with noise and motion for a few brief, treasured weeks of summer. Marjan does not find this quiet sad. She has learned across 68 years on this headland that quiet and sadness are not, in fact, the same thing at all, that a room can hold its stillness gently, patiently, full of everything it has already held and everything it will hold again, without needing to be filled at every moment to justify its own existence. The room waits. The jar of sea glass catches, faintly, the last light from the hallway. Everything is exactly where it should be. The radio, a small radio, sits on the kitchen shelf, its dial worn smooth by decades of use, tuned most evenings to the shipping forecast that comes at a fixed hour each night. A familiar, almost liturgical recitation of sea areas and wind directions and visibility that Marjan has listened to for so many thousands of evenings that she could recite long stretches of it herself, from memory, in the same measured, unhurried cadence the announcer always uses. Tonight's forecast, received an hour or so before Marjan climbed to light the lamp, promised nothing more dramatic than what the evening has already delivered. Westerly winds, moderate to fresh, occasional showers, visibility good, a forecast that matched, as it usually does, close enough to what her own long experience of this headland sky and sea had already told her without needing any radio at all. The radio serves other purposes too. On this remote headland, a weekly call scheduled with her son on the main island, brief updates from the harbor authority on matters of maintenance and supply, and on the rare occasions the wider world's news seems worth the trouble. Whatever broadcast happens to reach this far, this clearly, through the particular atmospheric conditions of any given evening. Mostly, though, the radio sits quiet, its usefulness saved for the specific, necessary moments when it is needed, rather than filled with constant, unnecessary noise. Margin, having long since developed a preference for the ordinary, layered sounds of the headland itself over almost anything a radio might offer instead. She switched it off some while ago now, its evening duty done, the forecast received and noted in its brief, habitual way, in the corner of her own private thoughts, alongside the more formal record already entered in the tower's logbook above. The kitchen is quiet now, apart from the fire's low crackle and the kettle, refilled and set again to warm. And the sea and the wind, and very faintly, the mechanism's steady hum from the tower above. It is enough. It has always been enough. The descent, the same narrow iron stair, the same tight spiral, the same 3 landings, passed now in the deeper dark of full evening, rather than the fading gray light of her earlier climb. Step by step, the tower around her creaks in the same familiar way it has always creaked. The wind outside continuing its same steady, constant pressure against the iron plates, the whole structure flexing very slightly and returning, exactly as it has done through 100 years of exactly this same wind. Margin does not hurry on the stairs. She has never hurried on the stairs. The stairs are, as she has always understood them, part of the work, not merely the means of reaching the lamp, but themselves a component of the whole experience of this particular occupation. The climb up representing one kind of preparation, the climb down representing a different kind of settling, a gradual return from the lamp, room's bright, focused atmosphere, to the ordinary, ground-level world of the cottage and the fire and the evening ahead. She reaches the bottom. She steps through the iron door, back out into the wind and the dark, and the sound of the sea working patiently at the base of the cliff far below. The air outside is fully night cold now. The last gray trace of dusk finally gone from the sky. A scatter of stars visible in the gaps between the moving clouds. More stars than most people who do not live on headlands like this one will ever see in their lives. The sky here largely free of any light but the tower's own. And tonight, the stars. She stands for a moment outside the tower's door. She looks up at the lamp room from below, the great beams sweeping past overhead, illuminating for a fraction of a second the low cloud drifting past, then gone, then illuminating it again. The light is doing its work. She turns toward the cottage and the fire and the evening's quiet remainder. The walk to the cottage. It is a short walk, no more than 30 steps along the worn path between the tower's base and the cottage door. But Marjan takes it slowly, as she takes most things on this headland slowly, feeling the wind push steadily against her from the west, hearing beneath it the sea's constant working at the cliff base, the birds' last few settling murmurs from the ledges below. The grass underfoot is damp with the day's intermittent rain, springy beneath her boots in the particular way that this headland's thin, wind-cropped turf has always been springy, a texture she has known under her feet since she was old enough to walk at all. A single window glows ahead of her, warm and amber against the surrounding dark. The cottage's kitchen window, its curtains not yet drawn, the peat fire's light spilling out across the few feet of ground between the window and the low stone wall. She reaches the door. She lets herself in. The warmth of the fire receives her immediately, along with its particular smell, peat smoke, and the kettle just beginning to sing at the hearth's edge, and something of the wool and the old wood and the 68 accumulated years of a single life lived almost entirely within these same few rooms. She hangs her coat on its familiar hook. She settles into her own chair by the fire, opposite her husband's empty one, and for a moment simply sits, listening to the wind outside and the kettle beginning its slow climb toward a full boil. And somewhere above her, faint but continuous, the low mechanical hum of the lamp's turning motor, a sound so constant in her life that she has long since stopped consciously hearing it at all, though she would notice immediately and with some alarm if it ever stopped. It does not stop. It has not stopped, not once, on any night she can remember. The light turns, the kettle sings, the fire burns low and steady. The tower 80 night, after Marjan has settled fully into her evening, her tea made, her chair warm, the last of her small evening tasks completed, after the birds on the cliff below have gone entirely silent, tucked into their thousands of small ledges against the thousands of small hollows in the rock, waiting out the dark hours until the light of morning sends them back out toward the fishing grounds. After the last fishing boat visible from the lamp room window has either made harbor or moved on beyond sight, its running lights no longer visible against the dark water, the tower stands as it has stood on every night of every year of its 100-year history. The great lens above turns its slow, patient circle, the beam sweeping out across water that is now completely dark, touching nothing for most of its arc but empty sea and the underside of drifting cloud, giving its light just as fully and just as completely to that emptiness as it would give it to any ship that happened to need it. The mechanism's small electric motor hums its steady, unbroken hum, exactly as it has hummed every night since the tower's electrification. A sound so constant that the cliff's own birds have long since stopped registering it as anything other than the ordinary, permanent background of their home. The iron plates of the tower's body, cooled now in the full night air, hold within their considerable thickness some faint residual warmth from whatever weak daylight the afternoon managed to produce. The whole structure functioning in its own patient way as a kind of thermal memory of the day just past. The wind continues. It has not stopped, and it will not stop, not tonight, not most nights. This headland's wind being less a weather event than a permanent condition of the place, as constant and as unremarkable to those who live within it as gravity. The sea works at the cliff base below, patient beyond any measure of patience that a human life can properly comprehend, wearing the rock down by degrees too small to measure across the lifetime of anyone who has ever stood and watched it, and yet wearing it down all the same, exactly as it has for the 6 million years since this particular basalt first cooled and hardened into rock at all. The headland settles further into its own vast, wind-scoured night. You are drifting. You are still on the headland, in a sense, or somewhere very near it. The beam's last sweep across the lamp room's glass still, somehow, present behind your closed eyes, though it has been some time now since you last consciously watched it pass. Margin sits by her fire, her tea cooling slowly beside her, her husband's empty chair holding its own quiet, familiar place across the hearth. The lens turns its slow circle above, 3 seconds of light, a pause of dark, a longer flash, and around again, patient and unhurried and utterly reliable. The birds rest in their thousands of small ledges, tucked against the cold rock, waiting out the dark hours. All of it here, all of it holding you. Your breathing has slowed to match the light's own steady, measured rhythm, light and dark, and light again, exactly as regular, exactly as reliable, not requiring any particular thought or effort, simply continuing as breathing has always continued, as the light has always turned and will turn again. On and on, through all the hours of all the nights that have ever passed, and ever will pass over this one particular headland at the very edge of the sea. This is what a lighthouse offers, if you allow yourself to receive it, even only in imagination, even only for this one quiet hour before your own sleep arrives. The deep, unhurried reassurance of something that has been watching over dark water, reliably and without complaint, for longer than any single ordinary life can fully hold. The particular peace of knowing that some things, properly built and properly tended, simply continue through every kind of weather, through the rise and fall of the ships and the sailors and the whole changing world beyond the headland's edge, through every ordinary night that life at the edge of the sea has ever required anyone to keep watch through. You do not need to keep watch tonight. You can simply rest in the knowledge that someone, somewhere, always is. The way the tower rests, patient, permanent, its light turning steadily above a dark and restless sea, trusting completely that when morning comes, the light will no longer be needed, and it will rest until the dusk asks it to shine again. The last things, the tower stands in the full dark, its iron plates holding their faint residual warmth, the great lens above turning its slow, unbroken circle. The beam sweeps the dark water, 3 seconds of light, a pause, a longer flash, and around again. The birds rest on their thousands of ledges below, tucked against the cold rock, waiting for morning. Margin is home. The peat fire burns low in the hearth, her tea finished, her chair settled into its own familiar shape beneath her. The logbook rests closed on its shelf. This evening's entry added to 34 years of entries before it, and to the 40 years of her father's entries before that. The mercury bath beneath the lens holds its perfect, frictionless stillness. The mechanism's small motor turning the whole great assembly with no more effort than a child's single gentle push once required. The path down to the tiny harbor lies empty and dark, its worn switchbacks visible only in memory now, marked by low stone cairns that no one needs tonight to find their way. The tower stands in the dark, patient iron, permanent. The great lens turns above, slowly, steadily, without pause. 3 seconds of light, a pause of dark, a longer flash, and around again. The birds rest on their ledges, thousands of them, tucked against the cold rock, waiting for morning. Margin is home. The fire is low. The tea is finished. The logbook rests closed. 34 years of entries, and 40 years before that. The sea works at the cliff base, patient beyond any measure of patience. The wind continues. It always continues. You are held tonight too, by this same ancient, patient turning of the light, by 100 years of iron and glass and careful human attention, by the knowledge that something steady and reliable has been watching over dark water since long before any person currently living was born. You do not need to keep watch tonight. You only need to rest in the knowledge that someone always does. The light will keep its circle. The birds will wait for morning. The tower will stand as it has always stood, as it will always stand. You are safe. You are warm. You are held in the light's long, patient sweep on the quiet headland at the edge of the sea, in the deep, settled dark of an ordinary night. The light will keep its turning. The sea will keep its patience until morning asks the light to rest. And you can simply rest. Good night, dear friend. Sleep well, sleep deeply. Good night, and